So we're moving on to the ninth house, but there's one thing that I forgot in regards to the eighth house, and that is the primary Varga that you want to look at for the eighth house. And the primary Varga that you want to look at for the eighth house is the Vimsamsha, or the 20th divisional chart. This is the chart that deals with religion, spiritual progress, capacity for devotion. The primary planets, the primary karakas for that Varga is Jupiter, which produces the spiritual teacher and mentor and one's own natural wisdom. And secondary karaka, just as important actually, is Venus, which represents one's capacity for devotion to any path or to a spiritual mentor. So you can look at Jupiter in the 20th divisional chart to see what is the state of one's wisdom, their natural wisdom. And overall, the 8th Bhava cusp, the 8th cusp in the Vimsamsha, deals with inner psychological states and capacity for transformation. And that's very important too, because the 8th house does deal with our capacity for transformation, which is why people with strong 8th house can be addicted to transformation. It can be somewhat rajasic. But again, transformation is not a bad thing. It's just when we try to get fixated on it, then we need to move from a rajasic state to a sattvic state, where we're able to remain in a state of tranquility and peace. But that's more a practice for yoga, and not necessarily for astrology at this time. So maybe one day we'll get into talking about astrology and yoga practice, which would be really fascinating. All right, so the ninth house. The ninth house has an affinity to Sagittarius and an affinity to Jupiter. The key word for the ninth house is deeper understanding. It shows our religious and philosophical and ethical principles and opinions. I like to look at the ninth house for our the state of our morals, or our moral character, the principles that we follow. In the step-by-step astrology course, that was a really fun portion to do. I'll have to make a list of the modules and what houses they go through, because I have those listed on my website. I have 8 different modules for that course for the download, and it'd be good if I could separate that out. But anyway, one of the things that we went over in this course, the step-by-step course, was looking at the influences on the ninth house and how that impacts a person's marriage, how it impacts their dharma, what's getting in the way of their dharma. Planets in bad dignity, whatever house they rule, whatever their innate qualities are in that ninth, can get in the way of their dharma. One client I've worked with recently had 7th Lord in bad dignity in the ninth. And 7th Lord representing partner can show that the marriage partner actually gets in the way of a person's dharma or purpose. And I mentioned that, and I was hesitant about it, not only because the chart was pretty good otherwise, and it seemed that in general the mate was, the partner was probably a good person. But you can't help it, even if you're in good relationships with someone, if you have the karma to have your dharma obstructed by partnerships or mate, well, that's something you have to learn to deal with, or move beyond, or do remedial measures for. So it's kind of interesting to explore the ninth house, because you can also see the quality of one's character and the quality of one's upbringing, the qualities instilled in you by parental upbringing. That's the ninth house. So the ninth house is related to gaining deeper insight. It can refer to higher education, whether that's college or whether that's philosophical explorations. A lot of times when there's difficulty to the ninth house, there can be breaks in education or resistance to education, or it can just show that the person doesn't need to go to college. So we can check the ninth house for that, or if college will get in the way of a person's direction in life. The ninth house can further indicate our capacity to counsel others. Why? Because if we have a good ninth house, good dignity, ninth house lord, good Lajatari Avashtas, good dignity plants in the ninth house, it means we can counsel people well, because we've got a good solid foundation that'll lead to higher fulfillment and expanding our horizons A lot of times you get some difficulties, especially Mars in the ninth house, just like in the fifth, and that can make a very dogmatic person or a fanatical person. And while they can be influential, usually it's through force, not necessarily through reason or through their just innate ability to share wisdom. So planets in the ninth can show what kind of insights or realizations dawn in the course of our life. It shows the attitude that we have towards spiritual and intellectual authorities. This can also be said to be related to Jupiter, because Jupiter is a planet that's a karaka of the ninth house, which is fascinating. Because if you see malefic influences in the ninth, bad Lajatati Avashtas in the ninth, if you see malefic influences to Jupiter, bad Lajatati Avashtas to Jupiter, the person will often have confrontational or difficult or malefic attitudes towards intellectual or spiritual authorities, which I find really interesting, because I can usually tell whether a person will get good insights from spiritual literature or spiritual teachers. I can also tell what kind of teacher they're attracted to because of influences to the ninth house and to Jupiter. And if I have someone talking to me, telling me about a wonderful teacher, and I see that Saturn is severely starving Jupiter, or I see that the ninth house is negatively impacted, I know not to even waste my time, because that'll show that they have an interest in a teacher that's not authentic, which is kind of a fascinating thing to think about. But they're attracted to teachers, or they're attracted to intellectual and spiritual authorities, which are either manipulative or don't really have the best interests at heart. Now, it's not always true. There are instances and situations where that can be canceled, or a person can learn and grow. So it's not always true. So don't take that as set in stone. But if you pay attention and you look at people's charts and you consider their own chart and how those influences are to Jupiter in the ninth house, you'll be surprised at what kind of knowledge you glean in regards to their response to spiritual and intellectual authorities. And I would advise using the tropical zodiac for this. It seems to work better with the tropical zodiac in this particular regard. So experiment, explore, share your understanding. And if you happen to have a Jupiter or ninth house lord negatively impacted by Lajatati Avashtas, please don't send me all kinds of difficult emails, because that happens sometimes, which is kind of proves the point. Because oftentimes when people have good ninth house and good Jupiter, they don't hold grudges, they don't take it personally. If they find it to be true, fine. If they don't, they just let it go and they move on. They realize that everyone has their own path to follow. Whether that's a path that's considered in our standards correct or not, it doesn't matter, because Jupiter sees how everything fits in, how everything has a place. So anyway, I digress. Let's go ahead and move on. The ninth house is said to make a person travel abroad frequently. Usually it's about going on pilgrimages, having overseas connections, and interest in other cultures and other religions. Malefic planets in the ninth can make a person challenge their own culture. They don't feel like they fit into their own culture, which is why oftentimes it's been said that in the West, people interested in Vedic astrology, they probably have a challenged ninth house, because that is something that's kind of going against their culture, at least in the West, okay? Because Vedic astrology and yogic principles at this time, primarily Christian or religions based in that kind of vein, it's kind of throwing it back in the culture's face that, hey, I'm not interested in that. Which is why oftentimes people interested in alternative spirituality or different cultures and such also have difficulty within marriage sometimes, because the ninth house represents marriage too. So all these things kind of tie together, which is really fascinating. All right. So Vedic astrologers often associate the ninth house with the father. That's usually a father as a guru, as a spiritual authority. I've often associated the 10th house with the father, because usually the father is an authority figure within the person's life. So it depends really on the approach the father took towards the child. Overall, the 9th is a house of grace, fortune, luck, finding solutions to problems easily, deals with religion, morals, faith, a person's guru and spiritual teacher. It deals with higher wisdom, higher knowledge, the ability to counsel others, higher education, law, performance of good deeds, charity, and virtue. A lot of times people who have a emphasized 9th house will also be involved in education, higher education or philosophy, even law, law that upholds the cultural norms, these sorts of things. Now, the Karaka planets for the 9th house are Jupiter, as we've mentioned, and the Sun. So again, consider these planets as well as the influences on the 9th when you are trying to ascertain the area of life ruled by, indicated by the 9th house, which is everything that we've just gone over. The 9th house is a Kona or trinal house, and planets here usually do very well to counteract negativity within the chart. Planets here in good dignity often function very well, meaning that whatever house a planet rules, whatever that indicates, that house in particular, when it goes in the 9th, it gives a person grace, fortune, and luck with those things indicated by the house. So 4th house in the 9th, 4th lord in the 9th, good 4th house matters. 6th lord in the 9th, good 6th house matters. These sorts of things. Now, the primary Varga for the 9th house is the Navamsha, because it shows our path in life, our direction. Most people's path is marriage, so that's why the 9th was indicated to be a Varga of marriage. But really it's our path in life, the path that we take. So it's very different nowadays than what it was. Some people have said that we become our 9th house. I've not really found that to be true. You don't really become your 9th house. The 9th house just gives more indication of what your potential is. So if you work towards it, you can grow into it. But it's not that one day you just become your 9th, you don't just become your Navamsha, pardon me, the 9th Varga chart. The Navamsha can show our capacity to be devoted to our path in life, whether it's marriage or whatever kind of work we're meant to do. If we've got a good Jupiter, it shows that we can see that whatever suffering we go through along our path is worth it. We can see how it fits in, because remember, Jupiter can see the bigger picture, how everything fits together. If Jupiter is not good in the Navamsha, we have difficulty appreciating our path or seeing how it fits into the bigger picture. If Venus is in good dignity, it shows that we make good choices that lead to higher fulfillment along our path. If it's not, then that shows that we have a tendency to make poor choices that don't lead to higher fulfillment along our path. And we can go through this with all of the planets. And I've covered this extensively in the Navamsha and Dasamsha course, which is available as a download through my site. So you might want to get that if you want to explore the 9th Varga and the 10th Varga primarily, especially purpose and career. All right. Next up, we'll move on to the 10th house.